They say true worth is found in the soil, but when a piece of machinery costs more than most men earn in 10 lifetimes, how much is your dirt worth? Today, we are going deep into the brutal economics of modern farming, where old ways meet new money, and one man dares to challenge the machine. This isn't a dealership, it's a cathedral of capital. The air conditioning hums, smelling faintly of new leather and ambition. Look at the congregation. Razor-sharp suits, custom boots that haven't touched actual mud in years. Everything gleams, especially her, the John Deere X9, a colossal $1.2 million titan of chrome and green. It promises efficiency, it demands deference. Then the automatic door sighs open, and old man Silas walks in. He carries the smell of real earth, of old oil, of true poverty. His overalls are faded denim, his boots heavy with yesterday's mud. The silence is instant. Every polished gaze cuts straight through him. They are judging the dirt he brought inside. The long walk across the gleaming showroom floor was an act of defiance, each step of Silas's muddy boots marking a challenge to the cathedral's authority. He moved not with the hesitation of a man lost, but with the grim purpose of a man executing a long-delayed sentence. He didn't seem to notice the razor-sharp judgment cutting through the air. He didn't look like a man about to spend generational wealth. He looked like a man about to demand back something that had been stolen. Silas approached the colossal green flank of the X9, a machine so tall, its cab window reflected the entire silent dealership ceiling. Donovan, the sales manager, a predator in a tailored suit, drifted closer, the rehearsed condescending smile fixed on his face, ready to manage the poor man's ejection. Silas paused, taking a breath that carried the faint scent of diesel and the heavier aroma of old sweat, and spoke. His declaration, clear and utterly devoid of question, cut through the air conditioning's hum. "I'm buying that X9." The voice wasn't weak or unsure. It was steady, maybe too steady, carrying a strange, almost archaic authority. It was the voice of a man who hadn't asked for anything in 50 years. He still hadn't touched the dirt off his boots. The sound was immediate and brutal, a collective expulsion of air turning instantly into high-pitched, mocking laughter. Donovan's laugh was the loudest, a sound polished by years of crushing small dreams. He steadied himself, wiping a fake tear of mirth from the corner of his eye. "Sir, I appreciate the jest truly, but the restrooms are back by the service bays." But Silas didn't flinch. His eyes weren't on Donovan or the laughing bystanders. They were fixed on a small, barely visible access panel near the X9's immense front wheel. Did he see something specific, or was he just ignoring the insult? Donovan leaned in, dropping the friendly facade for a sneer carved out of pure contempt. "Look, Pop, that machine, the X9, it's $1.2 million, plus the specialized heads. We're talking $1.5 million before taxes and financing fees. We're in a different league here. This isn't the used pickup lot." He gestured widely at the gleaming floor, inviting everyone to share the joke. Silas finally looked at Donovan, and the manager recoiled slightly. It wasn't anger in the old man's eyes, but recognition. He recognized Donovan from somewhere, but Donovan clearly didn't recognize him. That flicker of familiarity was deeply unsettling. Silas's silence was heavy. It seemed to challenge the very foundations of the dealership. One of the impeccably dressed customers, a young man with a platinum credit card shined to his teeth, muttered loudly, "He probably thinks you pay in chickens." Donovan recovered quickly, stepping forward to establish dominance. "Let's be clear, sir. Qualification for an asset like this requires verifiable liquid assets of at least $500,000 just for the down payment. Do you have an account manager we can call?" The question about the down payment was designed to shame, but Silas simply reached into his faded bib pocket. Instead of a checkbook, he pulled out a heavily folded, yellowed piece of paper. Not a financial document, but a handwritten deed. What kind of property title was he holding on to? The paper looked older than the X9's patent. Donovan tried to snatch it, assuming it was a coupon or a joke, but Silas held it fast. "I don't need financing," Silas said, the dust in his voice coating the sharp edges of Donovan's superiority. "I need to know the maintenance record on the hydrostatic drive, chassis model 700 series." The question was precise, technical, and completely unexpected from a man who looked like he slept in a barn. That technical knowledge hit Donovan harder than any insult. It suggested Silas wasn't just a poor farmer, he was a specialist. Where did an old man like this learn the specific chassis codes for prototype equipment? Donovan felt the eyes of his commission-hungry peers on him. This wasn't just humiliation for Silas, it was a performance review for Donovan. He had to crush this absurdity immediately. "Sir, we don't discuss technical specifics with, the sale is contingent on verified funds. Do you have the cash, or are you just wasting our time because we have actual buyers waiting?" He looked pointedly at the young man who had laughed earlier. The young man, however, had stopped laughing. He was staring not at Silas, but at the crumpled deed in the old man's hand, his face draining of color. Why did that young man recognize that specific piece of paper? Donovan shifted uncomfortably. "Available? What does that even mean, old-timer? We're talking wired transfers, verified bank holdings, proof of generational liquidity, not cash stuffed in a mattress. This machine represents the future of farming, an investment only serious organizations can afford. Your declaration isn't a purchase, it's a trespass." His voice cracked slightly with forced authority. The bystanders relished the humiliation, betting on how long until security arrived. Silas, however, seemed utterly detached from their cruelty. He looked past Donovan, through the wall, maybe even through time. He smelled the new leather, but he seemed to remember the smell of fire and old grudges. He nodded slowly, as if making peace with a long-held debt. "The funds are available," he stated simply, "and I believe I know precisely where they came from." He then did something completely unexpected. He walked past the X9 toward the back offices, stopping directly in front of the locked, private entrance marked Owner's Suite. He didn't knock. He simply stood there, his muddy boots marking the marble floor, radiating an expectation that the door should open. How did he know the owner's suite was located precisely there, tucked away from public view? This wasn't just about buying a tractor anymore. It was about laying claim. Donovan gaped, finally speechless, the mockery dying in his throat as a silent alarm began to ring in his professional consciousness. Maybe this wasn't a joke, but a calculated, brutal intrusion. This was a man who knew the layout of the castle, and worse, knew the king. The laughter in the showroom ceased entirely. The humiliation had reversed its course, threatening to engulf the very people who had initiated it. The true cost of the X9, it seemed, wasn't measured in dollars, but in decades of forgotten history. They saw the mud, they saw the hat, they saw the decades of quiet labor, but they never saw the blueprint. Silas Kincaid wasn't born rich. He was born hungry, and maybe a little mean, the kind of mean that sharpens a dull blade. He left the family farm not because it failed, but because it was simply too small for the sprawling, rooted vision already simmering behind his eyes. He didn't want a visible empire. Visibility meant taxes and competitors, and competition meant wasted energy. Anonymity was his greatest asset, the deep, dark soil from which everything grew. He started with marginal plots, the kind local banks scoffed at, tracts so tangled with bureaucracy and neglect that only a fool or a genius would touch them. People called him the quiet buyer, the man who only showed up in notary offices after the sun went down, carrying a battered briefcase and speaking only in monosyllables. What was it about those specific plots? On the surface, they looked useless. Poor drainage, questionable access, too far from the main roads. Yet, examined in concert, they were all geographically linked, forming a hidden interlocking perimeter around the most valuable holdings in the valley, specifically the properties belonging to the Donovan family and their associates. Silas wasn't buying land. He was assembling a lock, piece by painstaking piece, ensuring that one day he would possess the legal infrastructure to strangle the entire operation. His method was simple and relentless. Optimize the forgotten. A creek bed choked with silt that the owner had given up on. Silas engineered a revolutionary low-tech filtration system that doubled the usable acreage for sustainable irrigation using minimal fuel. He never used his own name on the deeds, of course. Always a series of meticulously planned shell corporations, small interchangeable LLCs registered in 3 different states, often managed by small-town lawyers who didn't even know they worked for the same client, let alone a growing agricultural powerhouse. His signature move wasn't buying fast, it was waiting slow. He was the silent vulture, patient, ever present at the fringes of every local auction and county debt meeting, never striking until the seller was drowning, usually right after a disastrous harvest or a particularly nasty divorce had exposed their operational weaknesses. He understood market dynamics better than any Wall Street broker. He knew personal ruin was the truest form of market incentive, and he exploited human error with surgical precision. For 20 years, the Kincaid name was synonymous with failure to the town gossipers. They pointed and laughed at his patched-up equipment, the welding scars covering his old machinery, and the way he drove a 20-year-old pickup while the rest of the established farmers drove new gleaming Fords. But they didn't see the operational logs. They didn't see the custom-built sensors he installed on every piece of equipment, monitoring fuel efficiency down to the drop, measuring yield per square inch with obsessive, data-driven precision. This wasn't primitive farming. It was industrial espionage disguised as rural poverty. He ran his entire operation like a black box algorithm, eliminating every cent of waste until the profit margin on his marginal, ridiculed land exceeded the bloated, inefficient returns of the big players who were too comfortable to innovate. Where did he get the seed money to start this ghost empire? The whispers persisted about a massive inheritance, but the truth was far dirtier, resting on a singular act of calculated cruelty. He made his initial, crucial capital by successfully predicting and ruthlessly shorting the futures market on his competitor's primary crop during the Great Drought of '95, using proprietary weather modeling that only he possessed. It was a ruthless calculation that earned him enemies he never spoke to, and the untraceable capital he needed to disappear into the shadows of the regional economy. Silas had endured 2 decades of snubs at the feed store, the bank, and the local diner. Donovan's contempt was just the most recent predictable verse of a tired old song. They called him backwards, laughed at his methods, and swore he farmed by the phases of the moon. He absorbed it all. He let the mockery wash over him, understanding something fundamental that the swaggering landowners missed. Their laughter was his greatest asset, a protective, self-imposed blindness. The more they dismissed him as a harmless, dusty eccentric, the less attention they paid to the intricate, multinational financial architecture he was building beneath their feet. In fact, the mockery wasn't just tolerated, it was meticulously cultivated. On several occasions, he deliberately spread false rumors about minor setbacks or mechanical failures, ensuring that the local opinion remained firmly fixed on his supposed inadequacy and lack of ambition. He actively paid certain low-level sources to dismiss him whenever his name came up. Every tractor he fixed, every ditch he dug, every contract he signed was a strategic step toward a singular non-agricultural goal: consolidation and ultimate control. The land he bought was marginal, yes, but when viewed as a whole, it gave him control over key water rights, essential access roads, and, most importantly, the logistical choke points surrounding the largest estate in the region, the estate owned by the family that operated the very dealership where he now stood. The X9 wasn't just a powerful tractor, it was the final, expensive key required to unlock the whole valley. He needed that machine not for harvesting wheat, but for a specific immense infrastructure project, a deep, high-volume irrigation trench that would completely devalue the remaining adjacent properties belonging to his adversaries by rendering their current water system redundant. The ultimate irony, that immense infrastructure project wasn't even strictly agricultural in its final form. It was a contract to build a massive, lucrative solar farm powered by state subsidies, right on the boundary lines of the high-value property he sought to ruin. His understanding of the dealership's floor plan, walking straight and unerringly to the owner's suite door, was no parlor trick, no lucky guess. It was a testament to his pathological attention to detail. He hadn't just studied their business and their land, he had studied them. He knew the owner's suite was located precisely there because he had spent 6 months hiring a former disgruntled construction foreman who had done the original renovation, meticulously tracing every wire, every hidden staircase, and every safe deposit box location. He knew the building better than the man who signed the mortgage. Why bother with such depth of knowledge about the building itself? Because the owner's suite wasn't just an office, it was the location of the private archives detailing the leveraged debt holdings of the family business, the paperwork that tied the dealership's finances directly to their agricultural land. The man standing silently at the door was not Silas Kincaid, the quiet buyer. He was Silas Kincaid, the patient investor, the architectural saboteur, the man who had perfected the art of the long game. His silence wasn't the silence of ignorance when Donovan mocked him. It was the chilling, absolute silence of a clock winding down to zero. The current owner of the dealership, the one presumably behind that locked door, wasn't the final target. He was merely the highest paid puppet. The real long-term debt holder, the entity providing the continuous leveraged capital to the dealership, was in fact another one of Silas's cleverly disguised holding companies. The confrontation wasn't starting. It was merely the final stage of an operation that had begun before Donovan was old enough to drive a Ford. Silas didn't need to yell or threaten. He simply needed to stand there and wait for the weight of history, his history, their neglect, to press the buzzer. The ultimate act of power wasn't seizing control in a sudden move. It was revealing the control already held. And the most chilling detail of all? Silas had not just bought the debt. He had structured the entire deal so that the very land being used as collateral for the dealership's expansion was technically, still legally subject to a long-forgotten right of first refusal clause he had signed back in 1999. The entire empire they believed they owned rested on one single piece of forgotten 25-year-old paperwork, waiting for Silas Kincaid to finally retrieve his due. The clock face shifted to 4 p.m. The air in the mahogany-paneled conference room had gone from thick with aggressive negotiation to brittle with anticipation. Donovan, the sales manager, straightened his tie, a purely habitual gesture meant to reclaim some sliver of professional composure. He knew this was his last line of defense, the administrative wall he was expected to maintain. He tapped his index finger against the main contract binder, the sound unnaturally loud in the vacuum of silence. He needed to ask the question, the one that proved Silas Kincaid was just another highly leveraged dreamer. Yet the papers he shuffled were meaningless. The final real contract had been signed electronically an hour ago, waiting only for a single non-negotiable contingency, proof of funds. Donovan cleared his throat, forcing a small, condescending smile. "Mr. Kincaid, the numbers look appealing truly, but we must finalize the financing details. We need specific assurance. Who is the lender? What's the collateral structure? Is this equity-backed?" He leaned back, crossing his arms, expecting to see Silas squirm under the weight of detailed financial scrutiny. Silas did not move, did not even blink, maintaining the stillness of a statue carved from granite. He didn't need complicated collateral structures. The money didn't require mortgage or debt. It had been instantly raised through the surgical, rapid liquidation of a competitor's stock portfolio, timed perfectly to fund this specific purchase and leave the rival exposed. Donovan pressed on. "We need the documents, sir. The proof of funds, the bank approval, the letters of credit. Standard procedure for a transaction this size, you understand." It was an attempt to regain control through bureaucratic tedium. Silas merely reached into the inside pocket of his perfectly tailored suit jacket. It was a slow motion, devoid of hurry, yet infused with absolute finality. Every person present, the 3 lawyers, the 2 accountants, and the visibly nervous Donovan, tracked that hand, anticipating a thick stack of loan commitments. Unbeknownst to them, the specific timing coincided with a quiet change in the security staff outside, a discreet maneuver coordinated by Silas's people, ensuring the emergency exits were monitored should Donovan attempt any physical or dramatic obstruction. Silas produced not a binder, but a single folded piece of paper, crisp, heavy stock, folded once. The simplicity of the action was horrifying. He slid the paper, without a word, across the polished table. It rotated slowly, catching the stark overhead light. Donovan hesitated, his face hardening as he fought the sudden cold dread. He snatched the paper up, his fingers slightly trembling as he unfolded it. The document confirmed a single clean transfer. The bank logo at the top, a failing regional institution, sent a spike of shock through him. Silas knew that specific bank was the very one where Donovan's father had just poured his entire retirement fund, unknowingly making Silas the deciding, silent factor in its ongoing solvency. Donovan's eyes quickly scanned the page. It wasn't a bank statement showing general assets. It was a wire transfer confirmation, immediate, irrevocable. The stated figure was circled in vivid red digital ink. It wasn't just the asking price. It covered every liability, every associated tax, and every hidden fee they had embedded in the fine print. The total sum was overwhelming, and that figure included an extra 2%, clearly marked as non-negotiable insurance money, payable directly and immediately into the employee's established pension fund. a tactical move designed solely to preemptively squash any subsequent legal appeal based on corporate social responsibility or employee welfare. Donovan turned the paper away from his face, pushing it toward his legal counsel, his complexion ghostly. He couldn't speak the number, couldn't articulate the finality. The lawyers leaned in, their expressions morphing from professional neutrality to slack-jawed astonishment. One of them, older and more seasoned, recognized the digital signature authorizing the transfer. It belonged to a reclusive, legendary financier rumored to have died 5 years earlier, confirming Silas's global network extended far beyond known financial circles. An absolute suffocating silence gripped the room, punctuated only by the distant, faint sound of traffic outside. Donovan finally understood. He wasn't witnessing a deal. He was observing the final act of a decades-long financial execution. He felt the weight of history in that moment. The transaction had cleared specifically at 4:04 p.m., matching the exact minute Silas's original family business had been forcibly liquidated by a bank years ago, a brutal, precise act of temporal revenge. Silas remained impassive, his posture unchanged. He had successfully delivered the final blow without raising his voice, without one unnecessary movement. Every action had been lethal efficiency. Donovan swallowed hard, the last vestiges of his bravado dissolving into shame. He had been played since the moment Silas walked into the lobby. Silas hadn't brought a phone, but the silence in the room was being meticulously captured by a sophisticated directional microphone disguised as a sleek pen sitting innocently on the conference table, recording Donovan's palpable defeat for potential future legal ammunition. Donovan slid the paper back across the table. It was a gesture of surrender. "It's confirmed," he mumbled, the word tasting bitter. The energy in the room instantly shifted from hostility to submission. The room knew who now held the power. The accompanying documentation included a non-disclosure agreement so severe and ironclad that if Donovan even attempted to accurately describe the speed and ruthlessness of this final action to his former boss, he would automatically forfeit 90% of his hefty severance package. Silas did not immediately pick up the confirmation. He let the paper rest there, a monumental receipt for the entire empire. The land, the debt, the business, it was all his. Unbeknownst to the vanquished team, the entire dealership infrastructure, all server access, security codes, and HR databases was simultaneously switching over to Silas's private proprietary network, triggered by a ghost key embedded within the financial transfer data. Donovan, desperate to salvage some semblance of executive grace, offered a weak, clammy hand across the table. Silas ignored the gesture entirely. Instead, he simply picked up his own pen and, with calm deliberation, affixed his signature to the final dotted line on the principal agreement. The soft scratching of the ballpoint pen across the paper was the final, irreversible declaration of ownership. The pen itself was a heavy Mont Blanc, a forgotten gift from Donovan's predecessor, bearing a small private inscription referencing a partnership Silas had long since dismantled. A final, personalized insult. Silas rose smoothly to his feet. The meeting was concluded. The silence that followed was not one of negotiation, but of absolute and utterly chilling ownership. It was 5:30 p.m. The long game was finally, definitively won. Silas rose, pulling the room's atmosphere taut like an old banjo string. He didn't move fast, just enough to demonstrate that the locus of power had shifted entirely, irrevocably. Donovan remained glued to his seat, the pale light of the expensive chandelier reflecting sickly in his eyes. The Mont Blanc pen lay on the mahogany, a silent monument to the colossal miscalculation. The advisory team, Trevor, Veronica, and the nervous young lawyer, Mike, were frozen mid-breath, their rehearsed corporate smugness dissolving into a thin, clammy veneer of dread. Trevor coughed, a dry, pathetic rasp that only amplified the terrible silence. Trevor realized he'd forgotten to delete a crucial file on his desktop, detailing their previous illegal attempts to sabotage Silas's smaller holdings, a file that was undoubtedly now migrating to the new owner's server. Silas didn't need to speak. His sheer physical presence now delivered the loudest indictment. His posture, previously slouched and unassuming, was now rigid, commanding, the kind of bearing earned by maneuvering complex supply chains and balancing even larger balance sheets, not by filling out unemployment forms. Donovan's lips began to move, forming a question or perhaps a plea, but no sound emerged. It was the crushing realization that this wasn't just about a single real estate transaction. It was about the methodical, professional obliteration of an entire corporate dynasty by a single, focused entity. Veronica, who had mocked Silas's ill-fitting jacket an hour prior, now frantically tried to recall the specific, insulting terms she had used in the hallway earlier. She suddenly remembered calling him that dusty old relic who probably measures his worth in bushels, a phrase she knew with cold certainty was already echoing among the executives of Golden Belt Agribusiness, a company Silas had been rumored to control for years. The shock wasn't just financial, it was existential. They had insulted the hunter who had patiently waited in the blind while they squabbled over the bait. The sheer scale of Silas's operation began to click into place, a monstrous jigsaw puzzle slamming shut in their minds. Mike, the young lawyer, suddenly remembered an internal memo buried deep in old archives, detailing the mysterious corporate restructuring of the massive Golden Belt conglomerate 3 years ago, a restructuring that had never been fully explained to the public. That memo had ended with a cryptic note: control ceded to the proprietor. He now understood with a sickening lurch that the proprietor was the man standing before them. The cold dread spread like spilled ink across the pristine conference table. They had dismissed him as a petty, small-time farmer looking for a quick payout. They had laughed at his insistence on reviewing the environmental impact reports, calling it hayseed paranoia. Now they realized his concern wasn't paranoia, it was rigorous due diligence on his own upcoming acquisition. The tract of land they were selling was, in fact, integral to Silas's existing continent-spanning logistics network, tying together grain elevators and shipping routes they never even knew existed on their own property. Donovan wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, his custom Italian cufflink catching the light. He realized with sickening clarity that the Ghost Key transfer didn't just take control of the network. It simultaneously flagged every single executive travel and entertainment expense claim exceeding $500 as fraudulent, guaranteeing immediate, ruinous SEC scrutiny beginning at dawn. The silence was suffocating, heavy with profound professional embarrassment. It wasn't the silence before a storm, but the terrible stillness after the final gavel had fallen, sealing their doom. Trevor looked down at Silas's worn, dusty work boots, planted firmly on the pristine, cream-colored carpet. These boots, which Trevor had internally ridiculed as the hallmark of a provincial bumpkin, were now the insignia of a conquering general. They represented literal, undisputed ownership of the dirt, millions of tons of it across the region. Trevor recalled his father, an old rival of Donovan's, mentioning a massive, anonymous investment group that secretly bought up every major water rights claim in the state during the last drought. He now fully understood who that group served and why their operations never seemed to suffer from water scarcity. Silas pulled a second, thinner sheaf of papers from his weathered satchel, the kind of rugged canvas bag you'd expect to carry seed samples or heavy tools, not controlling interest documents. These weren't the transfer documents, they were immediate operational directives. He carefully laid them out. Donovan finally found his voice, a high, reedy sound that betrayed the seismic panic gripping his gut. "Silas, wait. We can talk about restructuring, a consultancy package. We can salvage this." Silas cut him off, not with words, but with a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, dismissing the notion entirely. Silas had already changed the internal emergency Wi-Fi password to a complex phrase referencing Donovan's most humiliating professional failure during the 2018 merger attempt, ensuring total technical chaos when the remaining support staff tried to log in remotely. Veronica, attempting to regain control through sheer executive force of will, tried a different, desperate tactic, sliding into a forced, overly sweet tone. "Mr. Silas, we always valued our association with the agricultural sector. Perhaps we could discuss a continued advisory role. Your deep expertise." Silas didn't even look her way. He was focused only on the new set of papers, signing them with the ease of someone performing a mundane daily task, like milking a cow or fixing a fence post. The paperwork outlined the immediate dissolution of the current executive board, effective 7 p.m., and the implementation of a new, lean operational structure. The new head of operations, according to the document Silas just signed, was scheduled to arrive precisely at 7:05 p.m. A woman known only in whispers as the Harvester, feared throughout the commodities industry for her brutal surgical efficiency and utter lack of mercy. Mike, ever the numbers man, began calculating the liquidation value in his head, his fingers twitching uncontrollably. He realized the colossal corporate debt Silas just assumed was utterly negligible compared to the sheer value of the collateral secured by Silas's already sprawling holdings. This wasn't a desperate gamble, it was a strategic expansion of an already unassailable empire. The whole charade, Silas's hesitant mannerisms, the cheap suit, the deferential tone, had been the most calculated, brutal form of sandbagging imaginable. They hadn't been negotiating with a victim. They had been giving financial advice to their executioner. Mike suddenly realized the small handwritten note on the margin of the operational papers indicated that every single high-level employee was required to immediately report to a remote, poorly maintained grain silo 3 states over for mandatory reorientation, a place without cell service or heat. The minutes stretched into an eternity, thick with regret. The measured ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner sounded loud and accusatory, marking the final moments of their professional and personal relevance. Donovan stood up abruptly, knocking his expensive chair back with a terrible echoing screech. "You can't do this, Silas. This is corporate espionage, unethical." Silas finally lifted his gaze, meeting Donovan's desperate eyes with a look that was utterly devoid of human emotion, the cold, pragmatic look a farmer gives a nuisance pest. "I signed," Silas stated, his voice flat, retaining that familiar, slow drawl but now imbued with chilling finality. "And you signed. Everything was legal, Donovan. You were just preoccupied counting your severance and ignoring the details of the transfer agreement." Silas's gaze lingered on Donovan's custom-made leather belt. He knew exactly which obscure Argentinian tannery had produced the hide, because Silas owned that tannery and had just authorized its immediate closure, effective Monday morning. Silas collected the signed originals, sliding them into the satchel and carefully zipping it shut. He didn't gloat, didn't offer a final, triumphant speech. That would have been too kind, too easy. Instead, he reached into the satchel again and pulled out a small magnetic branded keycard, a new access card for the building that had just been issued. He tossed it lightly onto the table, the plastic barely missing Donovan's trembling hand. This was the final defining insult. They were so thoroughly irrelevant that they didn't even rate a personal escort out of the building. Silas turned toward the door. The dirty boots, heavy with the dust of successful harvests and now the spoils of corporate war, took the first deliberate steps toward the exit. It was 6:45 p.m. As he reached the ornate, custom-built steel door, Silas paused just long enough for the vanquished executives to notice a small metallic flash hidden beneath his cuff, a tiny, custom-engraved tracking device that had been feeding his proprietary network their every whispered word for the last 6 months. The game was irrevocably over, and the clock was ticking down to 7 p.m. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, it was the sound of utter defeat, echoing off polished mahogany and broken pride. Every judgment, every sneer, every patronizing glance flashed back at the vanquished executives, a slideshow of their own fatal arrogance. Silas reached the ornate, custom-built steel door. He didn't look back. He simply placed his hand on the cold steel handle, his fingers brushing against the engraved logo of the company he had just dissolved. At precisely 7 o'clock, the final, absolute consequence arrived. Not with a shout, but with a sudden dull thud from the server room downstairs. A scheduled, systematic shutdown. The tannery, the cornerstone of their perceived authority, was instantly digitized, archived, and legally, irrevocably gone. Silas stepped through the door and into the cool twilight air. He took a deep, clean breath, leaving the stale, trapped air of judgment behind him. The keys, the final physical symbols of the assets he now controlled, jingled softly in his hand, a metallic lullaby of victory. They had mocked the boots, the plain suit, the lack of pretension. They saw a farmer, a simpleton, a man unworthy of their time. They failed utterly to recognize the ruthless efficiency beneath the veneer of humility. They failed to realize that true disruptive power rarely broadcasts its arrival with fanfare. Their mockery was not just rude, it was a profound, catastrophic professional and personal error. The price of their arrogance was everything. They were left not with anger, but with the chilling, haunting, indelible memory of the man who walked away, the quiet, dusty harvester who had just reaped their entire future. Never judge success by the polish on the shoe, but by the weight of the steps. Prosperity whispers, insecurity always shouts, for in the arena of true conquest, the loudest ones are often the first to fall, silenced by the unassuming thunder of genuine achievement. Thank you for watching this journey into pride and downfall. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more profound narratives, and tell us in the comments, what is the most important lesson Silas taught us today? Until next time.